Pom pom. Can you hear me? Okay, let's begin. Haven't seen you in the lecture for a lot of time, long time no see. It's especially bad that we stopped in the middle of the lecture basically a long time ago. So we need to recall what we were talking about. Well, I hope it will not be very difficult because we've discussed the same stuff during the seminars, during the practical classes. So today is our 7th lecture, and we'll talk about dynamic games with imperfect information. So we continue talking about dynamic games with imperfect information. And we also start talking about repeated games. And also in the very beginning, we'll discuss group projects. So group projects. I hope you remember that you have 3 grading elements in this course. 3 or 4? I think 4, sorry. One of them is average of your quizzes. We try to calculate average. Seems like there is some mistake. We'll try to correct it. So the first is average of your quizzes. The second is the first test we had a week ago. The next one is the final test at the end of the course. And the last one is group projects. So what we expect you to do, please organize groups of 4 or 5 people. It can be people from different groups. We're okay with it. I mean, different university groups. And we ask you to find the real life situations and explain them in terms of game theory. So use game theory to draw some insights about real life situations. This part about real life is important. Please don't use textbook example. In this course, we do a lot of theory, right? We discuss very stylized situation, not very realistic. And this assignment is exactly about applying it to real life. So don't just draw some example from textbook. Try to find something with a lot of context and details. We actually expect from you to present us all this context and all these details about the real life situation. So it's not like problems we discuss in the seminars, then they are very abstract. Find something real life. I'll give you a couple of examples. So we want you to write down small text about it. The first one is the memo for general public. So let's say you want to explain something to people in your company, but these people, they don't know game theory. So you don't have to use some fancy terms like rollback equilibrium or something like this. Don't use them. Just explain what the problem is. Explain what are your suggestions, what are your recommendations, and try to explain why using very simple language. And the second text is the opposite. It's a technical text. So use game theory apparatus, these ideas of Nash equilibrium, rollback equilibrium, other stuff to explain why. So first part is non-technical and the second part is technical. And then we'll have short conversations, short presentations, then we'll have a chance to ask you questions. You'll have to prepare slides, but it's basically the same stuff you have in your writing. Maybe 2, 3, 4, maximum 5 slides. Is it clear? Great. So here are some examples for you. I like the first one probably the most. In the last years, a lot of attention was brought to marketplaces, competition of marketplaces in Russia. Partly because of pandemics, companies like Wildberries, Ozon, Yandex Markets experience very high rates of growth, right? And it's very competitive market. The forming market, and it was very competitive. Now then we have big changes, situation probably quite different, right? So this idea is try to analyze this competition. For example, you work for Ozon, what are your recommendations? Basically, the main trade-off is probably whether to expand market share or try to concentrate on profitability. Of course, it's difficult to answer without a lot of details and context. So try to find this detail and context if you choose this topic. Well, I hope not all of you will choose it, and otherwise it would be very boring to listen to your presentations. The second example, so these are just examples for you to better understand what we expect from you. You can choose completely different situations. So the second example is about planes. A lot of people in airlines industry said that they don't really expect, it was really unexpected for them that the Western countries requested these planes to be returned to leasing companies. The idea why they said it's unrealistic is what to do with these planes. So because of pandemic, airlines have very difficult times. And if all Russian planes will go to these mostly island companies, they don't know what to do with them. So why then Western countries decided to introduce these sanctions? Well, my guess is because they expected that Russia will never return them, because it's impossible for Russia just to have no planes at all, no airlines. So it's interesting case to think about as a dynamic game. Maybe there is some, think about rollback equilibrium in it. And final one, I think I mentioned it in the very beginning of the course, it's a business competition between Sega and Nintendo throughout the 90s. So if you like consoles, if you like to play, maybe it would be interesting. There is a whole book about it. And here, of course, you cannot do recommendations because it's a history, but you can draw some lessons. So if your case is not about current situation, but about past, you cannot make recommendations what to do, but you can draw the lessons. So try to explain what was the mistake of the companies, so in future not to repeat them. Do you have any questions about projects? The end of the course, yes. You have some time. We'll give you detailed assessment criteria later, but they will based on the previous slides. This part about real life situation is very important. But that's okay. I mean, in real life, it's really difficult to have like 100% objective information. Look, what you do here is you have, I forget the word, even in Russian, предпосылка, I think. How do you call it in English? Okay, let's call it this way. Sure about something, but you can say, let's assume, assumption, Yes, it's called assumption. So let's assume that, and then you explain situation based on these assumptions. I think it's actually a very good practice to explain your assumptions explicitly, provide them explicitly. So that's what you can do. So if you think you don't have objective information, you are not sure that something is true, you can say, let's assume it's true. And then our conclusion are this. So no more questions about group projects. No? Okay. So let's continue discussing dynamic games with imperfect information. And our topic is combining sequential and simultaneous move. But before we move to combining them, let's try to solve this game. So there is a non-trivial information set for one of the players. Can you see it? So we have 3 players. We have N, we have Bob, and we have probably Konstantin, Cons. And there are 2 actions available to all of them, right? So N can do capital A or small a, Bob can do capital B or small b, and Konstantin, he actually cannot distinguish between these 2 nodes, and he can do capital L or capital R. So let's try to solve this game. Let's try to find the solution, the Nash equilibrium. It's a dynamic game, right? So we need to use rollback equilibrium. But the problem is this part of non-trivial information set. You remember that every dynamic game can be presented as a matrix, as the static game. It's just not all Nash equilibrium that we have in this static game, they are sub-game perfect, right? Some of them can be not sub-game perfect. So in this sense, sub-game perfect Nash equilibrium, it's another game for rollback equilibrium. It's one of many Nash equilibriums that are possible in this game. So let's make a table. We have 3 players, so that's why we present it as the 2 tables. You can see that N is the page player. So left table is N choosing capital A, and right table is N choosing small a. Can you see it? Bob is the row player, and Cons is the column player. So we presented this game as the matrix. In your test, you had, I think, similar situation. Then you have 3 players, and you need to present the game as the matrix of 3 players. So if you check if all payoffs are correct, for example, if N plays capital A and Bob plays capital B, this outcome is being realized, right? Do they have how it's called, slide there? How to do it? I don't know. Okay, so 3-3-3 happens if N plays capital A, Bob plays capital B, and it doesn't matter what Cons do, because so both these outcomes are the same. No matter what Cons do, it will be 3-3-3. Let's take a look at this outcome. So N chooses small a, right? Then Cons choosing, let's say, L. Then it's 4-4-4. It doesn't matter what Bobs do. So they are the same. So is it clear how we make this matrix? Okay. So now let's try to solve for Nash equilibrium. So we are not doing rollback equilibrium. We're just using best response. We solve this game as a static game. So we think about it as a static game, and we use the matrix. We find best responses for every player. And if all of them play simultaneously best responses, this is Nash equilibrium. So let's start from Bob's best responses. So if N plays capital A and cons play L, so what is Bob's best response? So it's a choice between 3 and 5. So small b is the best response in this case. So it's best response to actions of 2 players, not 1. It's a best response for N playing capital A and cons playing capital L. If N play capital A and cons play capital R, then best response is to play capital B, because 3 is greater than 2, right? So let's look here. So here N plays small a, sorry, and cons play capital L. Then for Bob is indifferent between these two. They are both best responses. And if N plays small a and cons play capital R, again, Bob is indifferent. So these were best responses for Bob. So now let's take a look at cons best responses. So if N plays capital A and Bob plays capital B, then cons can play capital L or capital R, and he's indifferent, so they both are best responses. If N plays capital A and Bob play small b, then it's a choice between 5 and 2, so best response is to play L. It's clear, right? So let's not discuss the second part. I hope it's clear. And finally, N. N, it's a page player, so we need to compare this part with this part, right? So look, if Bob plays capital B and cons play capital L, for N, it's a choice between 3 and 4. She's indifferent, so she can play both. Both are best response, playing capital A and playing small a. If Bob plays small b and cons play L, then it's choice between 0 and 4. So N should play small a, right? So this is how we solve the game with 3 players. Can you see Nash equilibriums here? Can you indicate them? So we have a Nash equilibrium if all players simultaneously play their best responses. And it's true if N plays capital A, Bob plays capital B, and cons play capital R. Here. So here all of them play best response. Another example is this. N plays small a, Bob plays capital B, and cons play capital L. So we have 2 Nash equilibria, right? So there are 2 Nash equilibria. Please remember again that Nash equilibrium is the profile of strategies. I'm grading the first test, and I can see that in the last problem, a lot of people write down just probabilities. That's not a right solution, of course. Because if the task is to find Nash equilibrium in mixed strategies, then it should be profile of strategies with associated probabilities, and not just probabilities. Maybe in another problem, some of you had similar problem, then you write down, let's say, outcomes instead of profile of strategies as a Nash equilibrium. So these are outcomes associated with this Nash equilibrium. Done. So this is a solution, actually. So in this game, we have 2 Nash equilibria. I hope that this idea of a dynamic game with non-trivial information set being basically the same as a static game, I hope this idea is clear for you. Think about rock, paper, scissors. So the very idea of playing rock, paper, scissors is that we do it simultaneously, right? I cannot see what you are showing is at rock, paper, scissors, and you cannot see what I'm doing. But can we play it as a dynamic game? Like you show me something and then I have to respond in 10 seconds. Well, we can if I close my eyes, right? And it's basically non-trivial information set. If I close my eyes, you can imagine it as a dynamic game. Then there are 3 nodes. One node, then you show rock, one node, then you show scissors, and another node, then you show paper. And all three nodes are in one information set for me because my eyes are closed and I cannot distinguish between them. And I make my decision without this information. So it's a dynamic game, but because I cannot distinguish, it's basically the same as a static. Yeah, right? Okay, so we are done with this part. Combining sequential and simultaneous moves. So we, together with you, we developed techniques that allows us to analyze both static and dynamic games. For static games, our main tool, our workhorse is the Nash equilibrium and best response approach, right? We can do dominance also. We can, for zero-sum games, we can use minimax and maximin, but probably the most powerful and universal approach is to use Nash equilibrium, right? And look at best responses. For dynamic games, our workhorse is the rollback equilibrium, right? So we start from the end of the game and we find sub-game perfect Nash equilibrium as a prediction about what will happen in the game. What if we have some combination of both? So what can we do when we have combination of both? And it's not just a theoretical question, because in real life sometimes we have situation then we have something very similar to combination of both games, simultaneous and dynamic. So let's take a look at one example. So we have two telecom companies, We have two telecom companies, Crosstalk and Global Dialog. Bye. So two companies. So it's oligopolistic competition, right? Famous example of where can we imply game theory in economics. So oligopolistic competition, each can choose whether to invest $10 billion in the purchase of fiber optic network. So it's investment decision, whether invest or not. To be or not to be, invest or not to invest. They make their decisions simultaneously. So it's a static game, right? They make their decisions simultaneously. So we don't have a leader and follower in this game. They make the first step simultaneously. If neither chooses to make the investment, that's the end of the game. So basically, the game ends here if both of them decide not to invest. But if one of them decides to invest, then it depends on what the other company will do. If the other does not, then the investor has to make a pricing decision for the telecom services. To make pricing decision. High price will attract 60 million customers, for each of whom it will make an operating profit of $400. And low price will attract 80 million customers, for each of whom it will make an operating profit of 200. We'll make a table to make it more easily to understand, to perceive. What if both firms if both firms acquire fiber optic network and enter the markets, then their price and choices become a second simultaneous move game. So the first choice was whether to invest in fiber optic or not to invest. If both of them invest, now they again play simultaneous game to choose high or low price. To choose high or low price. If both choose the high price, they will split total market equally. So they divide it equally. What? I thought that was some question, no? If both choose the low price, again, they split the total market equally. And if one chooses the high price and the other the low price, then the low price firm will get a lot of customers and the high price firm will get nothing. Well, let's assume it's a homogeneous product, and what's the sense of paying more for the same if you can get it at lower price? Okay, sounds complicated. So this interaction forms a two-stage game. We'll make a tree in a second and try to analyze it. So this is how it looks. So it starts with a simultaneous game. Simultaneous game. Both companies have to decide whether to invest or not. Right? So actions available to them are invest and not to invest. If both of them decide not to invest, we have payoffs already. It's a 0 and 0, right? If at least one of them decides to invest, then the second step is this firm will decide on the price. And it's not decision under competition, because it's like a monopoly. I'm the only firm able to provide this service, and that's why I myself decide. It can be high price and low price, right? If Global Dialog invested, then Global Dialog will decide on the price, high or low. Well, it's better to have a high price, right? The firm is a monopoly, so it can settle very high price and get a lot of profit, like 14 here, and low price will bring 6. Quite evident that, yeah. Something wrong with calculations? Yeah, I remember. Well, I follow textbook here very closely. So if I made a mistake, it's a mistake from the textbook, but I don't think it's a mistake. So yeah, 60, each of whom will make an operating profit of yeah, I think it's a mistake then. Well, ranking should be right. Ranking seems like ranking is right. So even if like absolute number is wrong, the solution still would be okay. Forget about it. So second step. So we are discussing the second step. Then Global Dialog and Crosstalk make their decisions about the price. It's symmetric. So Crosstalk have the same, completely the same situation. And finally, both of them decided to invest. So there are two firms in the market, and they need to decide on the price. Seems like it's better for them to establish a high price. So they have two. If both of them establish low price, it's -2. And the worst possible outcome for the firm is to settle high price, then the competitor chooses low price, right? So it's -10. So is it clear, like the story, all set up, it's all clear, right? So they make basically two decisions. First decision is whether to enter the market. And the second decision, what price to choose. And although it's very stylized situation, it's still realistic. So this is what usually firms have to decide, whether to enter the market and what price to choose. So how to solve it? Any ideas? To the what? Yeah, it's a dynamic game, so it makes sense for us to use a rollback approach to start from the end. And these two parts, then global dialogue and crosstalk, make their decisions. They are very easy, right? They are not complicated. So both of them will do what? Choose high price, right? Both of them will choose the high price. What about second game? So can you do it? So for example, if global dialogue will play high, what should crosstalk do? So playing high. So for crosstalk, the best response is to choose low, and this is 6 is better than 2, right? So if global dialogue will choose low, then the best response is to choose low again, right? So you can solve it by dominance. Low dominates high, and it's the same for global dialogue. Low dominates high, so we have, so what is Nash equilibrium? Low and low, and outcome is -2, -2. That's why after we solve this second stage, we can simplify the game. It's called the reduced game. So we can write down, instead of these empty spaces in the table, in the original table, original matrix, we can write down this payoff. So we have 14 and 14 and -2 and -2, right? So you understand where they came from. So the task now is to solve it for Nash equilibrium. So if global dialogue decides not to invest, then for crosstalk, it's better to invest. If global dialogue decides to invest, then it's better not to invest. So it's better to be the only part in the only company in the market. And it's symmetric, so it's the same for the global dialogue. So you can see that there are two Nash equilibria. The first Nash equilibria is crosstalk invest and global dialogue doesn't invest. And the second is crosstalk doesn't invest and global dialogue invest. So an equilibrium strategy of crosstalk in full game for Nash equilibrium 1, invest on the first stage and high-low on the second stage. High if I'm the only firm in the market, and low if there are two firms in the market. An equilibrium strategy for global dialogue again. No, in this, it's the first. It's the first equilibrium. Don't on the first stage and high-low on the second stage. Can you tell me what is predicted outcome then? So what we predict to happen in the game in this equilibrium? Sorry? Crosstalk invest, right? So crosstalk will enter the market. It will be alone and it will choose high price. So it will get 14, right? And global dialog will get 0. So this is the first equilibrium. The second equilibrium is symmetric. Now another firm enters the market, the second firm doesn't enter, and it's 14 for the second firm. Is it clear? Do you have any questions? So we combined two approaches, right? So we have a static games, but the whole game is still dynamic. So we use a rollback approach, but we solve static games while doing it. Okay, let's solve one more game. So now it's a leader and follower game. So let's say that global dialog is already in the market. So this is not an empty market like it was in the first game. So now we already have global dialog in the market, and crosstalk has to decide whether to enter the market or not. Whether to enter the market or not. So to invest means to enter the market, don't means not enter the market. So if crosstalk decides not enter the market, then global dialog as monopoly can decide on the price. And again, it can be 14 or it can be 6. But if crosstalk enters the market, now they together simultaneously have to decide on the price. A similar approach. Again, we have a dynamic game. We can start solving it from the end. It's pretty easy to do for this part. We can be sure that global dialog will choose high. Here we need to find Nash equilibrium in a static game, but it's the same game, so it's low, right? You can see that low dominates high for both players. Then, again, we can simplify game, right? And we can see that equilibrium strategy for crosstalk in the game is low and don't, and equilibrium strategy for global dialog is low and high. Another example. It's about American football. Sorry, do you like examples from American football? I don't know, if you read the textbook I recommended to you, it has a lot of examples from American football. It's really popular actually among people who study and teach game theory because there is a large strategic component in American football. So the first stage is the coach's decision. So let's say there is a break, and coaches of the teams, they can recommend them to play safe or to play risky. So we simplify. Of course, in real life it may be much more complicated, but let's say there are two options: play safe, play risky. And there is offense team and there is defense team. They both can play safe and can play risky. So if both of them play safe, you can see payoffs 2 and -2. If offense plays safe and defense plays risky, then offense gets 6 and defense gets -6. And if offense plays risky and defense plays safe, then it's 30 and -30. The most interesting part happens if both of them play risky. So if they play risky, then we have a second stage. In the second stage, offense can change play or don't. If they don't, it's -10, 10. If they change play now, defense can respond or don't, and it's 2, -2, 6, -6. So again, we use a rollback approach. We use a rollback approach. We start with the end of the game, so defense has to decide. And -2, of course, it's better than -6. So defense will respond. We can predict defense to respond. Offense expects defense to respond. So it's choice between 2 and -10. And 2 is better than -10 for offense. So offense will choose defense. So we can put in this matrix, we can put 2 and -2, right? Instead of empty space, we can put 2 and -2. And now we can solve for Nash equilibrium. If defense plays safe, then for offense it's better to play risky. Best response is to play risky. If defense plays risky, then for offense it's better to play safe. And if offense plays safe, then for defense best response is to play safe. And if defense play risky, then for offense the best. Okay, I'm a bit lost. I need to make to have a whiteboard and make signs. So an equilibrium on the second stage game is change and response. An equilibrium in full game doesn't exist in pure strategies, and that's why, because I'm lost. So if you put 2 and -2 in this matrix, there is no equilibrium, right? So use your notebooks to solve. So there is no equilibrium in full game, at least in pure strategies. Any questions? Any questions? What if you have several Nash equilibrium in the second stage? Well, we actually had, I think, in the first game. So here, no, we have one. When we have several equilibriums in the full game. I thought here we have the same. Any other question? Full game? So the whole game is everything you see here. There are, if you think about it as a dynamic game, there are 3 stages. Let's start from the very end of the game. So this is the last stage. This is before the last, and this is the first stage. So 3 parts in it. So we can solve for this stage, for example. It's, well, about this part, right? Yeah, so here second stage is actually 2 stages. So all this part without initial matrix. Have I answered the question? No, the full game is everything, but after we reduced the game, so we solved this part, the second part, we solved it, and instead of empty place, we put 2 -2, right? So we simplified it, and then we solve this. This is a full game, actually. After simplifying, now we solve this matrix and we solve the whole game. We solve the whole game. Any other questions? Okay, let me check the time and we'll continue. So we are in the middle and feels like it's 2 hours gone. Okay, so repeated games. Repeated means we repeat the game. Right? Let's start with our favorite game called Prisoner's Dilemma. So can you solve it? Let me take a water and you'll solve it. So what do you predict to happen in this game? And as always, people don't cooperate, right? Nash equilibrium is Pareto inefficient outcome. So here you can see that for player one, D, don't cooperate, is always better than C because 1 is greater than 0 and 4 is greater than 3. So by dominance, we can eliminate C. And now for player 2, 1 is better than 0, right? So we can again eliminate C for player 2. So by dominance, we found that the Nash equilibrium here, if we eliminate by strict dominance, it's the same. The solution is Nash equilibrium. We can see that our prediction is both players will refuse to cooperate. So all of them will choose do not cooperate, and the outcome would be 1 and 1. Famous prediction from Prisoner's Dilemma. People do not cooperate. So what if after these two players played Prisoner's Dilemma, at the second stage they again play the same game? And they don't forget. So they remember what happened in the previous stage. This setup is a more realistic, right? Because in our real life, we usually interact many times. So for example, you have a group mate and your group mate asks you for help, and it's better for you to refuse, like in short terms, but maybe later you'll have to ask your group mate, and that's repeated interactions, they change your calculus, right? So we have this idea that maybe if it's a repeated game, because I'm concerned about what will happen later, if another player will help me later, maybe in a repeated game, this negative outcome that people don't cooperate, an outcome is not Pareto efficient, maybe we can somehow overcome it. Maybe in a repeated game, now we have a wonderful solution, then people cooperate. So take a look at the tree. So it's getting complicated very fastly. So if you repeat it not 2 times, but 3 times, so try to imagine the tree. So how many strategy profiles would we have? Well, how many strategy profiles we have here? Can you count them? Well, we can do it during the seminar. And if you think about 3 stages Prisoner's Dilemma, it's very complicated very fast because we have a lot of probable outcomes. We have information sets, right? So we have non-trivial information set. It's a simultaneous game. So every stage is a simultaneous game. They decide to cooperate or not to cooperate simultaneously, without observing without observing another player's decision, but they observe previous player's decision at the previous stage. So for example, if I need to decide whether to cooperate here and I'm the second player, I don't know what first player will do at the second stage, but I know what he did at the first stage. I already have this information. So why we have these payoffs? Why we have 6 and 6, for example? Because they accumulate. So we assume that in repeated game, they accumulate their payoffs. So what happened here? They both copulate at the first stage and they both copulate at the second stage, right? So if you go back, it's 3 and 3. That's why we have 6 and 6. So both of them copulate 2 times. So if you take a look at the matrix, we have 3. If we repeat it 2 times, both of them will have 6. If, like, the best possible outcome is if to copulate, second player decides not to copulate. First player decides to copulate again, second player decides not to copulate again. So it's 0, 8. Can you see this outcome? So 4 multiplied by 2, it's 8. 0 multiplied by 2, it's 0. So I hope it's clear, right? So what is your prediction what will happen in this game? Well, you can start from using your intuition. So what do you expect? Will they copulate or not? So you expect them not to copulate. But why? It seems like the second player can retaliate. If the first player refused to copulate, maybe I should not copulate. So he's basically losing copulating with me. Mm-hmm. No, we don't assume. It just, I tried to explain how these payoffs are being formed, and I have chosen the simplest cases, they choose the same. It's just, I was trying to explain why 6 and 6, for example, but it's not necessary for them to repeat. Do you remember we played, or at least we tried to play, the game called Сороконожка? In Russian, Sependid, I think. Centipede, right? Do you remember? Does it remind you something? Well, there is no static part in centipedes, but still the idea is very similar. Actually, it's also about cooperation, and in centipedes, if we use rollback approach, we can see that in the last stage, it's better to not copulate. It's better to not copulate. And if in the last stage it's better to not copulate, then in the previous stage, because another player expects me to not copulate in the last one, so it's better to not copulate in the previous stage. And it's rolled back till the very end. And it works very similar way here, unfortunately. So if you solve it, so we can solve it for the second stage, because for the second stage, it's basically the same as the initial, right? So we solve the initial game, and then we have a reduced form. So we reduced it. Now we have a matrix presenting us the whole game. I hope it's clear how we get it. We solved the second stage. We predict they both will not cooperate in the second stage, and then we used this. What we have? 4, 4, 7, 3, 4, 4. Not 5 1. Yeah, 5 1 1 5 2 2. So we solve the second stage. We put this payoffs in the matrix, and now we can solve the reduced game. So if you let's solve it. So it seems like again the dominant strategy is to not copy rate for both players. And unfortunately, it's a sad story. It's a sad story. Seems like even if we repeat Prisoner's Dilemma, we still don't have a cooperation. Still don't have a cooperation. And if we think about it in a general term, like let's say we repeat it a million times, doesn't matter. If it's a finite number of stages, the equilibrium is still not to cooperate. Well, something is wrong here, right? Because in real life, we observe cooperation. So game theory looks like it looks darker than in real life. And people still cooperate somehow. They still achieve some outcome. So why? Can we model somehow real life? So this is the conclusion from finite repeated games. So this unique equilibrium will be played at any stage. So it doesn't matter how many stages you have, it's still the same unique equilibrium, like an original game. But what if we have infinite repetition? So what is infinite repetition? How to think about it? You can think about it in a way like sooner or later we'll die. So there is no infinite game. Or like you have some interactions with your group mates, but you'll study in the university for 4 years, somebody maybe 5, maybe 6, but still sooner or later these interactions, they will end. So we can think about infinite game as the game that you don't know then it will end. For fans of Master and Margaret, the phrase was «Наша жизнь неожиданно смертна», something like this. So, yes, sooner or later this game will end, but we don't know why. That's why we can think about it as the infinite game. So, how to solve infinite game? How to solve infinite game? If we go back to the original matrix, where is the original? So let's say I'm always cooperating. Like I'm really good guy, we play infinite game, and I'm always cooperating. I'll get 3 multiplied by 3 till infinity. So I get infinity. My payoff is infinity. Sounds great. So I'm a good guy, and my contribution, my reward is infinity. Perfect. What if I'm a bad person and I never cooperate? Or, for example, I always cooperate, but my partner is a bad person and never cooperate. So I get 0. No, with zeros it actually doesn't work. That's funny. So I don't cooperate and my partner don't cooperate. So I get 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 many times, and it's still infinity. So how to solve it? So it seems like there is no difference. It seems like there is no difference between getting 1 and between getting 3 because it's still infinity. Other ideas? So it seems like if we have an infinite game, it doesn't matter if we are getting 1 in every game or if we are getting 3, it's still infinity. But it doesn't make sense. They should not be the same. So what to do about it? do you think? Calculate what? Yeah, it's somewhat in the right direction, I think. So in infinite repetition, expected payoff is the sum of all payoffs, but we have something that usually called delta. Well, here it's W, I think. Discount factor. Do you remember discount factor from finance? So the idea here is that if I can get one right now or I can get 1 week later, I would prefer it right now. One reason is because I can invest it. I can put it on a bank account and get some interest. Another reason is, well, I would like to consume something right now. Because if I get it, this sum immediately, I can consume it right now, or I can consume it later. I have a choice. But if I get it week later, I can consume it only a week later. It's better to have a choice. Another way to think about discount factor as the probability that the game will change. That the game will stop. I'm sorry. It's really difficult to teach offline after online. Online was better. So I'd love to, but it's not for me to decide. So where I stopped. So we can think about this discount factor as the probability that the game will stop. Right, we've discussed what is infinity in a more realistic way of thinking. We cannot live for infinity. We sooner or later will die and the game will stop. But we don't know when. So you can think about discount factor as the probability that game stops here. So I discount my payoff at the every next station. So if I get 1 right now, it's a 1. If I get 1 during the second stage, is 1 multiplied by my discount factor. Discount factor is somewhere between 0 and 1. If it's 0, it means, well, I don't care about future at all. If it's 1, it's we have this problem with infinity. So it's somewhere between. And what we get is geometric series. Remember, I think you all discussed it in the finance course or something like this. So a rational player always can get a guaranteed payoff. In this graph, so we have payoffs. It can be 1 and 1. It can be 4 and 0 for both players. And it can be 3 and 3. And this area, it's area of possible payoffs, right? So now we can think about players as being different in some respects, because this discount factor, it's characteristic of the player. Well, we can, in real life, we can observe that some people care about the future, like they save money, for example. Other people, they don't care about the future. They enjoy their life right now. You can think about it as people having different discount factor, right? So if two players play Prisoner's Dilemma, and both of them don't care about the future, they care only about now, how you expect them to behave? How you expect them to behave? To cooperate or not? Not to cooperate, right, not to cooperate. So we expect them not to cooperate. So to cooperate, they need to be patient. They need not to discount future too much, strongly. Then what kind of strategies they will play? Do you remember in the very beginning of the course, I give you a link to the game called Trust, I think, Trust game, with people, with funny people coming to each other and throwing coins or not. Remember? So then it was just for illustrative purpose to show you that there is a dynamic games, not dynamic games. But here it's the perfect example to illustrate these strategies we are going to discuss. So most popular strategies in a dynamic game, in a repeated game. So naive, it means to play cooperates always. It's like really bad guy, always cooperates, always give the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth chance. So what should the second player do? Never cooperate, of course, in this case. So tit for tat. Can you explain tit for tat? What? Око за око, зуб за зуб. Yeah. So it's from the Bible. So I respond you the same way as you did. So you, and so I can kind of retaliate you for the things you've done in the previous stage. So I can start cooperating. At the first stage, I cooperate. I observe that you don't cooperate. In the second stage, I don't cooperate. The problem of tit for tat is that if the second player expects me not to cooperate in the second stage, he will not cooperate. And then for until infinity, they will not cooperate. Win, stay, lose, shift. To play cooperate if chooses at previous stage were identical, otherwise to change. And Grimm strategy. Have you heard about Grimm strategy? Grimm strategy. Yes, because it gives Nash equilibrium, stable outcome. So Grimm strategy is to play cooperate until first deviation of the second player and play don't cooperate forever. So never forgive. So Grimm strategy means never forgive. And Grimm strategy gives a stable outcome, interestingly. I think not all. So these deltas, can you see them? This is discount factor. So I get 4 in the very beginning, right? Then I get 1 in the second stage, so it's multiplied by the delta, my discount factor. In the fourth stage, it's delta multiplied by delta. So why multiplied? Well, if you think about delta as a probability to survive, so to get to the third stage, I need first to get to the second stage, right? So if my probability to survive and get to the second stage is a half, So my probability to survive and get to the third stage is 1/2 multiplied by 1/2, 1/4. So here's how it works. So it looks like a long series till infinity, but you know how to solve it, right? So it's a geometric series. We can simplify it and present it this way. So 3 divided by 1 minus delta, 3 plus 1 divided 1 minus delta. And if we solve it, the most important part for us here is the delta. So it depends on what delta is. So here, both players use Grimm trigger strategy. Again, Grimm strategy is I cooperate till you don't cooperate. If you don't cooperate at least just one time, I'll never forgive you. I will always play don't cooperate till infinity. We assume that preferences are identical here. So they have the same discount factor. Of course, people can be different. So you interact with your group mates and you are patient and your group mate is not patient, but it would be more complicated to model. So we assume that both players are the same, they are identical. So expected payoff of copyright and game is symmetric. So we don't have to write down separately for two players. They are the same, expected payoffs are the same for both players. So expected payoff of copyright is 3 divided by 1 minus delta. Expected payoff of deviate is 3 plus 1 divided by 1 minus delta. So now all we need to do is to solve this inequality. And you can see that delta should be, for players to copyright, delta should be greater or equal to 1/3. So if both players play Grimm strategy, it's an assumption. If they have the same discount factor, so they are both patient in the same rate, then they will copyright. So we can predict them to copyright. Payoff of copyrighting is greater than expected payoff of deviating. Any questions? I think it's the last slide. Okay, so I'm here to answer your questions. We still have some time. If you don't have questions, bye.
У нас есть два этапа. Практика происходит два этапа, да? И мы ее